So that's all I've got for that. Now on to the secondary review. I'm going to do a non-spoiler review for Girls State. And to bring us into that, I'm going to play a little stinger here and then a clip from the trailer for Girls State.
They tell me I view obsessively.
It's politics.
Girls State is like high school teenage girls who care about government.
Are you friends?
No, we'll become friends.
Yeah, obviously.
In 2040, I intend to run for president.
So I think at Girls State, I'm gonna run for governor.
Attorney General.
Supreme Court Justice.
Okay.
We're never gonna get the opportunity to talk to people from different parts of Missouri the way that we are right now.
I am a very social person. I will talk to a wall. Often when women start talking politics, we get shut down.
All right, so Girls State, it is available to stream on Apple TV Plus. It was at Sundance and bought by Apple TV Plus, and it was released on Apple TV Plus on April 5th. Directors for this documentary were Amanda McBaine and Jesse Moss. The plot summary is: it follows 500 adolescent girls from all across Missouri as they come together for a week-long immersion in a sophisticated democratic laboratory where they organize a Supreme Court to consider the most contentious issues of the day. So I was extremely excited for this movie. Extremely excited because in 2020, these same directors, these same filmmakers came out with Boys State, which was a documentary about the same thing, like the same, I think it's like the American Legion puts it on, but they basically do this concentrated week-long, kind of like a United, like mock UN or whatever it's called, like fake government thing, mock government thing, but they basically do that for a week. And in 2020, they had a documentary called Boys State, which was the boys side of it. And even then, I remember thinking like, oh, that'd be really great because if they did like an additional documentary about the girls side of it, because there is a Girls State program as well. And as luck would have it, they had the same idea and they did it. And I did mean to rewatch Boys State, which is also available on Apple TV Plus. But I didn't get a chance to rewatch it, but I do remember just adoring that documentary. And it came out at a time where obviously it was 2020, very different time and very contentious time with in terms of politics and the kind of level of politics that were kind of all across the world or all across the country. So it was a very contentious time. But what I found so interesting about that documentary was that as jaded and cynical as I have become about like modern politics and U.S. politics and people, like, I don't know, people that have viewpoints that are opposing to mine, like it has become so much more contentious over the years, even since 2020, that it's something that I try not to participate in or be conscious of, because I know my ideals, my values, all of these things, and I try not to judge too many people for their beliefs or their ideals and everything, unless they go to the fucking Capitol on January 6th, whatever. But anyway. So that's to say that in 2020, Boys State stood out as a really interesting view of like high school kids, like 17-year-old kids, putting together like a mock government in a week time and taking it so seriously and exploring their viewpoints, their positions, the way that they can just dive into politics. And what was surprising to me about Boys State was that it made me feel hopeful for the future. Like, there are kids who take it so incredibly seriously. And yes, that documentary became kind of contentious with some of the subjects and some of the subjects of the documentary. But at its heart, I thought like, man, this is a depiction of thousands of kids who are passionate about government. And there's a little bit of a glimmer of hope in that makes me excited for future generations. And maybe not, I don't know if I'm ready to be excited about the future of the country, but it is something that gives a glimmer of hope. Having said that, that preamble brings me to Girls' State, which came out obviously this year, 2024. And I kind of have the same thought. Like, I have the same idea that, in fact, like on Letterboxd, I don't have it in front of me, but on Letterboxd, I said something to the effect of, if these filmmakers want to make a documentary about kids' experience with mock governments and their political ideals and how they socialize among other politically minded people, if they want to do this every 4 years, have at them. Like, I would love to see them make this same type of documentary once every 4 years when there's an election, when years of presidential elections. I just think that would be great. But the reason I say that is because this gave me so much hope again, hope and positivity toward the future of the country, because these girls in this documentary are very passionate about it. And what I found so compelling and interesting about that is that they are very focused on their experience and their role within the country and within government, their potential futures with the government. And like one of the girls says, like, yeah, and you know, my intention is I'm in 2040 I'm going to run for president. And I do like, and I had the same thought with Boys State in 2020, but I thought, like, man, it would be so interesting if, like, in a couple of decades we get someone in one of these documentaries runs for president or has like a big political career. I just think that would be really interesting to see. But anyway, this is not, I would say that this documentary is about even with Boys State. And there are some aspects of it that really elevate it above Boys State. In particular, and I don't think I can really spoil a documentary, but this isn't really a spoiler. But what I found so interesting about this was that the week that this takes place, that they did their filming, they did the Girls' State thing, like it's a big thing. Two things occurred around this time. This was June 2022. One is that this was the Missouri Girls' State thing that's done yearly. It was the first year that the Girls' State and Boys' State of like Missouri Boys' State and Girls' State took place at the same time on the same campus. So there are some moments here and there where the girls like run into the boys and there's a lot of conversation about like the differences between Boys State and Girls State, which I found pretty interesting because it paints a very clear picture of one, like the Boys State being a lot bigger than Girls State and like having a lot more advantages and privilege and everything than the girls' version of it was. So that highlight was really interesting, especially when it comes to comes to a head with one of the girls kind of taking up the mantle of like not exposing it, but like basically trying to do something about that, like that discrepancy or the difference between Girls' State and Boys' State. That's one thing that I found interesting. The other thing that I found fascinating, and I think puts it into such a unique and interesting perspective, is that, like I said, this was filmed during like early June 2022. This happened in the between time between the Supreme Court leaking the notes about wanting to overturn Roe v. Wade and just before the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. So throughout the documentary, you have like these all of the like the 500 girls in this thing that have the potential overturning of Roe v. Wade at the forefront of their minds. And it comes up and they talk about it. There's a lot of obviously differing opinions, because like they also, like they say, like, you know, I'm more conservative leaning or I'm more liberal leaning. And there's a lot of like debate and conversation surrounding it, surrounding that topic and everything, which I also, as an aside, I think it was kind of funny. It was kind of funny to me that, from what I remember of Boys State, I remember the boys being a little bit more clear and confident about their political leanings, whether it was conservative or liberal. And I found it interesting and a little fascinating that in 2022, because that was in 2019, but in 2022, when they were filming this, like there was a lot of, like one of the girls is like, well, I don't really want to, like she's very much trying to figure out how she can basically tell people that she's conservative without them not listening to her or them shutting down. And I thought there was a really funny line where she said something like, I feel like a lot of these girls are probably like a little like leaning on liberal side of things. And like she says, like, I just feel like I can kind of tell because the liberal girls are louder. And I thought that was kind of funny as a liberal dude myself. I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, so the positioning of the documentary, just by happenstance, taking place shortly after the leak that Roe v. Wade was potentially going to be overturned, and the lead up to actually being overturned, that puts it in this pocket of time that I found pretty fascinating to watch unfold, especially with it being the subject of the documentary being 500 girls who are passionate about politics and government, and they're kind of dealing with that, the potential of that big legislation happening, and the kind of the good and bad of that, depending on their personal beliefs and everything. They're kind of debating that and they're figuring that out in real time. And I thought that was a really interesting way, or an interesting thing that's captured in this documentary. I will say that I feel like it's probably an interesting experiment, because I came away from this documentary ultimately thinking that, like, well, you know, I remember Boys State being a lot more contentious. Like, I remember like the big like governor campaign came down to like these two boys in Boys State, and it was a big contentious campaign, and there was a lot going on. Girls State follows the same trajectory, follows the same structure because it's the same program, but it's not that contentious. Like, I feel like that maybe is a statement on the world that, like, you know, Boys State is more like, oh, cutthroat and everything, and Girl State's just like, we're just trying to have our voice in government. Like, we're trying to not be pigeonholed, or we're trying not to be silenced, or, you know, have our like rights stripped away by men. Like, we're just trying to work together to have a voice in government. And I think that that's awesome. I thought that was a kind of an interesting and an interesting kind of, not inverse, but an interesting change or difference between Boys State and Girl State. So I did appreciate that, and I did like that. But at the risk of just sounding like an idiot, you know, movie goer person, I wanted it to be a little more exciting though. So like, it's kind of a mixed bag there. I do think that the kind of later in the documentary, like after, there's kind of like an addendum to it, not an addendum, but like kind of a postscript to it, where like one of the, like I alluded to earlier, one of the girls is working on kind of exposing the differences between Boys State and Girl State, that she's writing this article, and that takes up a lot of time late in the documentary. And I really liked that. I thought that was like, I wish that there was a little bit more of that, because she's a very interesting girl in the documentary. She's a very interesting subject because she has a passion for journalism. but also a drive to want to be president and like want to succeed at Girl State. And the track that she follows throughout the documentary is really interesting and captivating because it doesn't go certain ways that she expected or we the viewer expected. But I really liked seeing that particular girl like kind of just like take the reins on something and run with it. Yeah, I don't know. It was really compelling. I just wish that there was a little bit more of that aspect of it, the differences between Boy State and Girl State. But also, that is also a kind of a double-edged sword, because I think that there was a risk of the documentary taking a little bit too much time, devoting too much time to like showing Boy State and like how it compares to Girl State, which I understand the documentary needed to do that because of that kind of final run at the end of it, with that one girl like going after kind of the differences between them. But also throughout the movie, or throughout the documentary, like it cuts to like a couple of scenes at Boy State and them running into him. I'm like, I already watched Boy State. Like obviously it's not the same one because it's years later and it's a different state. But I'm like, I've already seen the documentary about Boy State. I don't care to see these teenage boys doing their government thing. I want to see how the girls do over here. Like it felt a little bit like, I don't know. It just felt a little bit annoying there for me. But it was in service to like they found the plot. They found the plot there, and they found a reason to depict some of the stuff from Boy State, because there is some very clear differences between them, and it's a really interesting kind of depiction of kind of a bigger problem within government, kind of the microcosm of a bigger problem within government. So yeah, so that is about all I've got for Girl State. Like I said, it is streaming on Apple TV Plus. I ended up rating it 4 stars on Letterboxd. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Boy State. And once again, I really think that I think that anyone who has a vague interest in politics, or even want to know more, I guess, about politics, I guess, I don't know. Anyone who's jaded, anyone who's cynical about the state of politics in the U.S. should watch these 2 documentaries to get a little bit of a boost of hope from hope toward the future. And I think that also kind of stems from the fact that these are kids who are teenagers, who have a passion for government. None of them are like influencers or celebrities, or they're not real estate tycoons who get bankrupt all the time, or they're not reality show hosts. They're not old ass people. They are kids who have a passion for government. And that is what kind of makes me happy to see, because they're not con artists. They're not people who are trying to game the system. They have an active interest in government, and that's what I want to see. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that I don't want stupid performative candidates or anything, or I don't know. It's all, who cares? It's just yeah. Anyway, that's also funny. As an aside, and I'll wrap up here in a second, but as an aside, so some friends of mine and I were talking about The Rock, and I guess WrestleMania was going on like a week or so ago, and some of the guys that I talked to, they were saying that they were positing that oh yeah, The Rock went back to WrestleMania because his acting career is faltering, and he is the idea is that he's maybe soft launching a presidential run in 2028. And I was particularly proud of this, and I also kind of think this a little bit, but my thought was the idea of The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, soft launching a run for president makes me a little bit more eager to see Alex Garland's Civil War this week, because I'll be able to escape into a reality where the U.S. is done, because I don't want that to be a thing. Like, I don't want celebrities in politics. Hard stop. Anyway, that is my review of Girl State. Once again, it is on Apple TV Plus. I highly recommend watching Boy State and Girl State because they are very interesting, engaging documentaries. I'm not going to do a potpourri section for this week, but I will say thank you to everyone who joined in on the live stream. And I've seen like the count go up and down and everything, so I don't know. But anyway, I had it set up to where only subscribers can comment on it. So Paige commented once and no one else commented. So I don't know if just people just didn't want to subscribe. But anyway, that doesn't matter. Check out Obsessive Viewer Podcasts on YouTube. I have a bunch of stuff on there, and I'm trying to kind of grow that channel a little bit to also funnel into more podcast listeners. So that will do it for this week's episode of the Obsessive Viewer Podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow the show on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app. Also, check out Obsessive Viewer Podcast's other shows, including Tower Junkies, a Stephen King podcast hosted by Tiny and myself, and Anthology, the Twilight Zone and classic sci-fi podcast hosted by me. Anthology has an episode coming out this week with my friend Victor Gamboa of the Outer Limits podcast. Had a lot of fun chatting with Victor about both the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits, so check that out on Anthology on Friday. Next week on the Obsessive Viewer, we are going to have a big show. Episode 424, I'm going to be reviewing Civil War with a new guest. I won't reveal who it is, but a new guest to the podcast. I'm very excited to chat with him about that. And the secondary review will be for Late Night with the Devil, which I've already recorded with Mike. So it's going to be a good show. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.